I didn't know a simple suggestion would change my life forever, and that I wouldn't even regret it. That thought hit me months later, looking back on the chaos that started it all. I'm Michael, 35, the guy who keeps things together, always have. I own a small home repair company, fixing leaks, framing walls, turning people's houses into something solid. It's not glamorous, sawdust and sweat, but it's mine, built from years of late nights and early mornings. I'm not the loud type, not one to stir the pot. Clients trust me, my crews too, because I'm steady, hardworking, the kind who'd rather solve a problem than dodge it. Loyalty's my backbone, or it was, until it started cracking. My life's a routine I've nailed down. Dawn at the job site, noon haggling over lumber prices, evening scribbling estimates in my office. It's not fancy, but it works, pays the mortgage, keeps the lights on, gives me a foundation I thought was unbreakable. I don't thrive on drama, never saw the appeal. If something's wrong, I tackle it head on. No fuss. That's how I've lived, how I thought I'd always live. Amanda used to say it was my strength, my calm, my drive back when we were a team, 7 years ago. She'd tease me, call me her rock, and I'd feel it meant something. Now, I'm questioning what it ever meant to her. She's 32, pure charisma, walks in and owns the space, no effort needed. Amanda's got this way about her, sharp wit, dazzling grin, that hooks people fast. She's a freelance designer, chasing gigs that let her mingle with creative types, the ones who talk trends over cocktails. I thought I'd build her a good life. My company's steady, our house is paid for, no scrambling to make ends meet. But lately, she's been off, slipping away, like a thread pulling loose from a seam I didn't see fraying. It's not one big thing, it's a slow drip, a leak I can't patch. It started creeping in weeks ago, little shifts that didn't sit right. She'd roll in late, breathless, muttering about client deadlines that stretched past midnight. Work's crazy, she'd say, flashing that smile like it'd smooth over the gaps. I'd nod, didn't pry, because I figured she'd tell me if it mattered. But the gaps kept widening. She'd vanish for hours, running errands, or meeting a contact, and come back distracted, eyes dodging mine. I'd catch her on her phone, typing fast, smirking at something I wasn't in on. I'm not the guy who digs through pockets or tails someone. I've got roofs to fix. But unease was settling in, heavy and persistent. Then the clues started stacking, quiet, nagging, like tools left out of place. A receipt for a yoga class I didn't know she took, tucked in her bag. Since when did she care about that? A coffee mug in her car from a shop she'd never picked, too upscale, too far. I'd ask, easy, no edge, and she'd laugh it off, say I was reading too much into it, her tone too slick, too practiced. I'd let it go, told myself it was nothing, just a long week, just my head playing tricks after a grueling job. But it didn't stop. She'd duck out at dusk, quick trip, she'd call it, back way past when stores close, her scent sharper, layered with something unfamiliar. It all crashed one evening. After a brutal day patching a storm-wrecked attic, I got home to a silent house. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, buzzing, screen glowing. I wasn't snooping, didn't plan to look, but it pulled me in. A message, Brian, plain as day. Can't wait for tomorrow, same spot? My stomach dropped, slow, cold, like a hammer slipping from my hand. I stared, pulse kicking up, her phone heavy in my grip. She breezed and then froze when she saw me, snatched it back, laughing too loud. Just a work thing, she said, spinning away fast. I didn't push, just watched her go, that name, Brian, burning into me. That wasn't work. That was something else, and it was the spark that lit the fuse I didn't know I'd been holding. That message from Brian, can't wait for tomorrow, clung to me. I'd glimpsed it on Amanda's phone and watched her snatch it away with that brittle laugh. It wasn't just a text, it was a wedge, prying open doubts I'd shoved aside for too long. I'd let things slide before, chalked her odd habits up to quirks, her excuses to a busy streak. But that night, standing in the kitchen with her eyes dodging mine, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. She's always had a knack for twisting the air around her, making you see what she wants, not what's real. Lately, though, that knack's been pulling her somewhere else, somewhere I don't fit, and I'm starting to see the shape of it. It had been simmering for weeks, bits and pieces that didn't line up, stacking like warped boards I couldn't plane smooth. She'd saunter in late, shoes dangling from her hand, tossing out, work dragged on, like it'd seal every question shut. I'd let it go, didn't want to poke holes where there might not be any, but her stories kept fraying at the edges. She'd slip out mid-morning, heading to a consult. She'd call over her shoulder, then roll back hours past any deadline, her bag empty, her gaze skittering away. Her phone's been alive lately, buzzing at all hours, her thumbs racing across it, a quick grin flashing before she'd tuck it close. Just tying up loose ends, she'd say if I lingered nearby, her tone too sharp, too practiced. There's a name behind it, Brian, and it's been rattling in my head since I saw it. She'd started yoga a few months back, her latest fling with self-care, coming home loose and humming. Her usual spark dialed up to something I couldn't place. He's part of that scene, bold, slick, the kind who turns charm into a game and plays it hard. He thrives on the edge, risks his oxygen, and her being spoken for? Just a detail to shrug off. They'd locked eyes over mats and small talk, her wit sparking off his swagger, and he didn't care about the life she had waiting at home. She's been weaving a web for him, feeding him lines, chasing a high she stopped looking for here. The signs kept mounting, relentless, prickling, like splinters under my nails. A yoga flyer slipped out of her purse one night, circled times, extra sessions she'd never mentioned, left on the counter like it didn't matter. A parking stub from a studio across town, too far for a casual drop-in, tucked in her dashboard, dated a day she'd claimed, errands. I'd toss out a question, soft, no heat, where'd you park that long? And she'd deflect, chuckling, oh, you know how it goes, her voice too smooth, too polished. I'd back off, didn't want to chase shadows, but the shadows kept chasing me. She'd duck out after supper, grabbing a coffee and strolling late, her jacket carrying a whiff of something musky, foreign, not ours. It crescendoed a week later, after a grueling day wrestling a warped frame into place. I got home to find her sprawled on the living room rug, phone propped on her knee, screen aglow. It buzzed, sharp, insistent, and she didn't flip it fast enough. I caught it. Brian, missed you today. Tomorrow's on. My gut clenched, slow, tight, like a vice cranking shut. Who's texting you now? I asked, keeping it level, probing her edges. She tensed, just a heartbeat, then flashed a grin, too loud, too wide. Some guy from a side gig, nothing worth fussing over, she said, hopping up, brushing past me toward the stairs. Side gig? She doesn't do side gigs, she picks her own path, always has. I watched her retreat, her lies settling like dust, thick, choking, impossible to miss. That wasn't a throwaway line. It was a flare, lighting up a truth she thought I'd never catch. Brian wasn't a phantom, he was flesh and bone, woven into her days, and that dodge turned a flicker of doubt into a blaze. I didn't confront her, not there, not then. I don't leap without looking. I measure, I map, I move when the footing's firm. But that text seared, playing behind my eyes every time she tossed an excuse, every time she slipped out the door with that half-smile. She thought I'd buy it, thought I'd stay tame. She didn't see what was building. I wasn't just wondering now, I was digging. Brian was real, her secret, her choice, and I'd unravel it, thread by thread, until it all came apart. Something was shifting, and I'd steer it where it needed to go. That second message from Brian, missed you today. Tomorrow's on, was the shove that pushed me past guessing into doing. Amanda's deflection, that quick, side gig, lie as she brushed past me, left a taste I couldn't swallow, bitter, raw, and sticking. I'd let her dance around me too long, her late nights, her slick grins, her phone lighting up with secrets, but that text was a brick through the glass. I wasn't imagining it anymore. I was sure. She was slipping away, had been for weeks, and Brian wasn't just a name. He was the pull, and I needed proof, hard and cold, to nail it down. I don't act on impulse, never have. I'm the guy who measures twice, cuts once, who thinks 3 steps ahead before lifting a tool. But this wasn't a job site I could walk away from. It was my life, unraveling thread by thread, and I had to see it clear. Her excuses had piled too high, nights she'd vanish with a breezy, out for coffee, days she'd dodge with consults that left no trace. Her phone buzzed like a live wire, text piling up, her fingers darting across it, her eyes flicking away when I'd get close. I tried asking, kept it light, gave her space, but she'd toss back half-truths, each one thinner than the last. I wasn't buying it anymore. Brian was real. I'd felt him lurking since that first message, but I didn't have the whole picture. Yoga was her cover, her new thing she'd come home humming, loose, like she'd shed something I didn't know she carried. I'd found that flyer, that parking stub, clues she didn't bother hiding well, and pieced enough to know he was in that mix. She thought I'd stay blind, thought her charm would keep me still, but she'd misjudged me. I don't sit idle when the roof's leaking, I fix it. And this leak was flooding everything. I needed more than hunches. I needed to see it, undeniable, in front of me. I'd been mulling it for days, turning it over while patching drywall, weighing it while hauling lumber, until I landed on the how. A camera. Small, discreet, tucked in the living room, motion triggered, no fuss. I'd picked it up cheap from a hardware guy I know, no questions, just cash, and set it up one afternoon while she was out. It wasn't about spying, it was about knowing. I hid it on a shelf, angled toward the couch, the spot she'd linger with her phone. If she was lying, if Brian was more than a side gig, it'd catch her. I didn't touch her stuff, didn't crack her screen. I'm not that guy, but this I could do. 2 days later, it paid off faster than I'd braced for. I'd been out late, rebuilding a porch railing, hands raw from the cold, when I got home to an empty house. She texted earlier, grabbing dinner with a friend, but the place was dark, her car gone. I pulled the camera's feed on my laptop, sat at the kitchen table, and hit play. The footage rolled, grainy at first, timestamped from that morning. She'd been home, alone, I thought, until the front door clicked open an hour after I'd left. She walked in, laughing, phone to her ear, then a guy followed. Tall, lean, dark hair, grinning like he owned the place. Brian. I didn't need a name tag to know. They didn't waste time. She tossed her bag, kicked off her shoes, and they sank onto the couch too close, her hand on his arm, his on her knee. You're late, she teased, voice low, playful, nothing like how she talks to me. Worth it, he shot back, leaning in, their laughter tangling. My screen froze them there, her head tilted, his smirk wide, and my chest caved. Shock at first, hard, fast, like a plank snapping underfoot. This was my house, our house, and she brought him here, bold as daylight. Then it shifted, anger, hot and thick, roaring up my throat. I wanted to smash the screen, rip the couch apart, march out and find them right then. But I didn't. I sat, staring, letting it burn through me. They kept going, talking, touching, her giggling at his lines like they mattered, and I watched it all, every frame a punch. She'd lied, every coffee, every errand, every dodge, and he'd walked in like it was his right. The anger settled, didn't fade, just hardened, into something else, a need, sharp and clear. She wasn't just slipping, she was gone, and he was the proof. I didn't yell, didn't pace. I shut the laptop, leaned back, and let it sink in. They thought I'd never know, thought they'd play this out under my roof. Wrong move. I rewatched it, twice, 3 times, memorizing every smirk, every gesture. She turned our home into their stage, and I wasn't letting it stand. Brian, whoever he was, had crossed a line, and she dragged him over it. I'd been patient, too patient, but that was over. Shock was gone, anger was fuel, and now it was about payback, smart, cold, mine. I'd waited for the truth, and there it was, glaring, ugly, real. This wasn't the end, it was the start, and I'd make sure they'd feel every piece fall. I had the footage, Brian and Amanda on my couch, laughing, touching, turning my home into their playground, and it was twisting in my gut every time I replayed it. That grainy video wasn't just proof, it was a match, lighting up everything I'd let slide, her late nights, her lies, that smug side gig excuse. I'd watched it enough to know every smirk, every casual brush of her hand on his arm, and it fueled me. Shock burned out, anger hardened into something I could wield. She thought she'd play me quiet, thought I'd never catch on, but she'd misread me bad. I don't just sit when the walls cave, I rebuild, and this time, I'd tear hers down first. I didn't rush it, didn't storm out swinging like some fool with no plan. I waited, let it simmer, picked my moment. 2 days after pulling that feed, she came home, breezy as ever, tossing her keys on the counter like nothing was up. Long day, she said, kicking off her shoes, not even looking my way. I stood by the sink, drying a mug, watching her play her part. Same old routine, same old mask. My laptop was open on the table, screen dark, the file queued up. Yeah, I said, keeping it low, steady. Mine too. She hummed, oblivious, rummaging in the fridge, perfectly at ease while I held her undoing in my hands. I set the mug down, soft, deliberate, and stepped to the table. Got something to show you, I said, tapping the laptop awake. She glanced over, curious, not worried, until the footage rolled. There they were, her and Brian, sprawled on our couch, her giggle filling the speakers, his grin wide as he leaned in. Her face shifted, froze, then paled, her bottle slipping, clattering loud on the counter. What is this? She stammered, voice high, eyes darting from the screen to me. I didn't blink, didn't move, just let it play, let her see herself caught. You tell me, I said, calm, cutting. Looks cozy. She lunged for the laptop. Michael, turn it off. But I stepped in front, blocking her. No, I said, sharper now, pinning her with my stare. We're watching this. Sit. She didn't. Just stood there, hands trembling, scrambling for footing. This isn't what it looks like, she blurted. Fast, desperate. He's just a friend, yoga buddy, nothing happened. Her voice cracked, too loud, too thin, and I almost laughed. Nothing? I echoed, nodding at the screen. That's nothing. She flinched hard, like I'd thrown something, but I kept it steady, letting the silence her. She pivoted, switched gears, eyes softening, stepping closer. Okay, look, I messed up, she said, voice dropping, pleading. It was dumb, all a mistake. I didn't mean anything by it. Michael, please, let's talk. Mistake. Right. I'd heard enough of her dodges, every coffee run, every quick errand, and this wasn't talking her way out. You meant it, I said, cutting through her act. You brought him here, my house, while I'm out working. Don't play me stupid. Her mouth opened, closed, no words, just a flicker of panic as she realized the charm wasn't landing. Then the twist hit, bigger than I'd expected. I leaned in, voice low, cold. What did you tell him about us? She blinked, fast, caught, then stammered. What do you mean? I pressed, didn't let her wiggle free. He thinks you're leaving me, doesn't he? That's why he's so comfortable here, thinks you're done. Her eyes widened, guilt flashing raw, and I knew I'd struck gold. I might have said something, she mumbled, looking away, hands twisting. I told him I'd filed, made it sound like we're over. It wasn't serious. She trailed off, and I stared, piecing it. She'd lied to him too, strung him along like she'd strung me. You lied to both of us, I said, stepping back, letting it hang. Classy. She grabbed my arm. Michael. No, it's not like that. But I shook her off, voice flat, final. It's exactly like that. You're done here. She froze, eyes wild, breath hitching, like she couldn't compute it. What? You can't, please. Let's fix this. Fix it? After she'd turned our home into a stage for her games? I pointed at the door, get out, and she stood there, stunned, like I'd pulled the floor from under her. Now, I added, no give, no bend. She didn't move, tried one last plea, tears welling. I'm sorry, okay? I'll end it. Just don't do this. But it was noise, empty and late. You ended it, I said, turning the laptop off, screen black. Go. She grabbed her keys, hands shaking, muttered something I didn't catch, and stumbled out, door slamming behind her. The house went silent, mine again, and I stood there, feeling it settle. She denied it, then begged, but that twist, lying to Brian about leaving me, showed her for what she was, a player, caught mid-move. This wasn't over. I'd make sure she'd lose more, and he'd feel it too. My way, my time. I'd thrown Amanda out, her pleas still ringing in my ears after that showdown, but kicking her from the house was just the first swing. That footage of her and Brian on my couch, her lies about fixing it, and that twist she'd told him she'd filed for divorce, lit a fire I wasn't letting burn out. She thought I'd stop there, thought tears and a slammed door would settle it. She didn't know me, not the real me, the one who doesn't bend when the frame's cracked. I'd given her 7 years, my trust, my home, everything, and she'd traded it for cheap thrills with some yoga slick. Brian didn't get a pass either. He'd strolled in like he owned my life. They'd both pay, and I'd do it clean, sharp, my way. She lived for the perks, fancy nights, my cash keeping her afloat, the house she'd paraded around like a prize. I'd handed her a solid life, roof over her head, no worries about bills, and she'd spat on it, chasing a rush I couldn't match. Fine, she'd feel what nothing tastes like. Next morning, I moved fast, called my bank, cut her off every account she'd leaned on. Joint cards, savings access, gone, locked tight, no trace left for her to tap. She'd wake up to empty pockets, no more shopping sprees, no more fueling her consults on my dime. I'd been her safety net too long. Now she'd freefall. She felt it quick, phone buzzing by noon, her name flashing like a siren. I let it ring 6, 7 times, watching it bounce off silence. Text piled up. Michael, cards declined. What did you do? Then more, frantic, call me, please. I didn't, left her dangling. Let her figure it out. The house was next, mine, bought before her, title in my name alone. I'd kept it that way for reasons I'd never thought I'd use until now. Locksmith came that afternoon, new keys, new bolts, her old set useless. Her stuff, clothes, trinkets, all that clutter she'd prized, went into boxes, stacked by the curb with a note. Take it or lose it. By dusk, it sat there, hers to claim, not mine to care. But Brian, he wasn't off the hook. He'd waltzed into my space, grinning, smug, thinking he'd want something, and I wasn't letting that slide. I dug enough from her phone, those texts, "missed you today," to know he wasn't a ghost. Took a day to pin him. Brian, 38, some yoga guru with a side hustle and personal training, peddling charm to bored housewives. He'd met her stretching mats, lapped up her divorce, lie, didn't care whose life he stepped on. I didn't need fists. I had better. His rep was his game: clients, classes, that polished image, and I'd crack it wide open. I'd kept the footage, every frame of them on that couch, and it wasn't just for her. I scrubbed my face, sent it anonymous, clipped, clear, to a local fitness forum he bragged on. Yoga Pro caught cozy, married client's couch. I typed, no name, just enough to spark. Word spreads fast. By week's end, posts popped up, clients bailing, studios cutting ties, his name muddied in whispers. I heard it through a guy at the hardware store. Brian's bookings tanked, his guru shine trashed. He'd lost his edge, reputation shredded, because he'd picked the wrong house to strut into. Amanda crumbled harder than I'd pictured, cards dead, locks changed, her stuff gone. She lost it all: house she'd nested in, cash she'd splashed, status she'd flexed with her artsy crowd. No more cushy fallback. Friends ditched her when the tab stopped flowing. She showed up at my porch 3 days later, rain-soaked, banging on the door, voice raw. "Michael, let me in," she yelled, pounding glass I wouldn't open. "I'm sorry, please, I've got nothing." I stood inside, lights off, watching, her silhouette frantic, unraveling. "You did this," I said through the pain, low, firm. "Live with it." She sank, knees on concrete, sobbing. "I'll change, I swear." But it was air, too late, too hollow. She panicked, tried tears, tried banging louder, then stumbled off when I didn't budge, her boxes still curbside, soaked through. Brian suffered too, his slick life cracked, clients gone, scrambling to save face. I'd hit them both, her comfort, his pride, with moves they'd never seen coming. She'd chased thrills, lost her foundation. He'd chased her, lost his hustle. They'd underestimated me, thought I'd roll over, let it fade. Wrong call. She'd beg again. I knew she would, but I was already past it, planning the next cut, and they'd feel every ounce of what they'd earned. I'd ripped Amanda's world apart, locks changed, her life dumped on the curb, and Brian's too, his yoga gig trashed with one well-placed leak. They'd crashed hard, her begging in the rain, him scrambling to save his name, and I'd watched it unfold without a flicker of doubt. That suggestion from an old lawyer buddy, legal loopholes to shield my assets, had turned the tide, and I didn't regret a single move. 3 months had passed since I'd locked her out, since I'd turned her sobs into echoes against my door. I'd moved forward, kept my days sharp, my head clear, but she hadn't. I knew she'd crawl back eventually, and she did, right on schedule, catching me at a café one crisp afternoon. I was mid-coffee, black, no fuss, scrolling estimates on my phone when she slid into the seat across from me. No heads up, no call, just there, looking like a ghost of herself. Her jacket hung loose, cheap, frayed, her hair flat. I shadowed. Nothing like the polished act she used to pull. "Michael," she said, voice thin, unsteady, like she'd rehearsed it too many times. "Can we talk?" I set my mug down, slow, deliberate, and leaned back, taking her in. She'd been running on empty, couch hopping, I'd heard, after her crowd bailed when the cash dried up. "You've got 5 minutes," I said, flat, giving her nothing to grab onto. She launched in fast, fumbling, hands twisting on the table. "I know I screwed up big time. I'm sorry, Michael, really sorry. I've got nothing left, nowhere to go." Her eyes darted to mine, pleading, wet voice cracking as she went. It was stupid. Brian was stupid. I was lost, chasing something dumb. "Please, just give me a chance. I'll make it right." She looked wrecked, shoulders slumped, fingers shaking, a shell of the woman who'd laughed off my trust like it was pocket change. I sat there, still, silent, letting her spill, letting her words pile up and fall flat. She'd lost it all: house, status, safety, and now she was scraping for crumbs. I didn't budge, just watched, feeling nothing stir. "You're sorry now," I said, voice even, slicing through her ramble. "Not when you brought him in. Not when you lied to me to him. Now, when it's all gone, that's when you're sorry." She winced sharp, like I'd flicked a switch, and tried to push back. "I know, I messed up bad. I hate myself for it, every day. Just help me, Michael. I can't keep going like this." "Help her?" After she'd turned my life into her game board? I leaned in, slight, controlled. "You picked that spot, sat in it. Stay there." She reached for my hand, desperate, trembling. Please, I'll do anything. End it. Fix it. Whatever you want. But I pulled back, cutting her off. You ended it. Day you let him in. You don't get to rewind now. Her face twisted, panic flaring. Then she tried one last card, voice soft, breaking. We had something, 7 years. Doesn't that mean anything? It had, once, but not now. Meant enough for me to trust you. I said, standing, chair scraping. You cashed that out. Then the twist. I couldn't hold it back. Besides, I've got someone new. Someone who doesn't trade me for a cheap thrill. Her jaw dropped, eyes wide, stunned, like I'd yanked the air from her lungs. You're with someone? She whispered, voice barely there, hands falling limp. I nodded. No details, no need. Yeah, someone real. Her shoulders sank, defeated, hollow, tears spilling now, but I didn't soften. Time's up, I said, dropping cash for my coffee. Take care, Amanda. I walked out, left her there, staring at the table, a wreck I didn't know a fix to. She'd come broken, begging, sorry too late, and I'd sent her off with less than she'd hoped, my calm a wall she couldn't crack. Life's clean now, no shadows trailing me, no weight dragging my steps. Business is solid, jobs rolling in, days full, and I've got clarity I didn't have before. She'd shattered something. Trust, mostly, but I didn't let it bury me. I'm cagier now. Eyes open, slower to give myself away, but I'm not done with the good stuff. That new someone. She's steady, no games, a fresh start I didn't expect, but don't mind. Amanda's out there. Lost, probably. Brian too. Faded to a whisper after his fall. They'd bet I'd fold. Thought I'd carry their mess. They were wrong. I cut it loose, built better, and I'm standing taller for it. Here's what I've learned. Betrayal's a spotlight, showing you who's worth your time. She wasn't. He wasn't. And I'm not wasting another second on either. You want a truth? Cheating's got a price, always, and they paid it. Me? I'm free, and that's more than they'll ever know.